Marcus Hale had spent the last 25 years serving as a district court judge, and for the first time in his career, he was ready for quiet mornings, long walks, and evenings without a courtroom's tension. The new house he purchased sat at the end of a winding street in a manicured neighborhood, surrounded by maple trees and peaceful smiles from neighbors who seemed friendly enough. The place was perfect, until the letter arrived. It came just 4 days after he moved in, tucked neatly in an envelope with the HOA's logo. At first, Marcus thought it was a welcome letter, maybe a newsletter or list of community events. But as he unfolded the crisp paper, his brow furrowed. The letter was cold, formal, and worded like a legal complaint. It accused him of unauthorized entry onto HOA-managed common property, and warned that any further violation could result in fines or even police involvement. Marcus read the lines twice, unsure whether to laugh or be concerned. The common property they referred to was, in fact, his backyard, a small patch of grass clearly marked within the property boundaries on the deed. He had walked there the previous evening to install a bird feeder and check the fence line. Now, apparently, that small act had made him a trespasser. He placed the letter on his desk and studied it like he would any court document. The language was aggressive, almost intentionally intimidating. He recognized the tone. It was the kind of overreach he'd seen countless times from small organizations drunk on authority. He wasn't angry, not yet. Just curious. That evening, Marcus strolled through the neighborhood, waving at a few residents. Some smiled politely, while others avoided his gaze. A couple whispered as he passed. It didn't take long for him to realize that the HOA here wasn't just strict, it was feared. Every mailbox seemed to carry the weight of their letters. When he returned home, he reread the letter once more and couldn't help but chuckle. If they only knew who they were dealing with, a sitting judge with decades of experience untangling property disputes and misuse of authority, they might have chosen their words more carefully. But Marcus decided to stay quiet for now. He would play their game, observe, and see just how far this HOA was willing to push. The next HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a neatly painted building that looked harmless from the outside. Marcus arrived early, dressed casually in jeans and a polo shirt, blending in among the neighbors who trickled in carrying notebooks and bottled water. The air inside buzzed with tension. People whispered complaints about parking fines, lawn height violations, and paint color restrictions. It didn't take long for Marcus to understand that this was less of a community gathering and more of a courtroom without rules. At the head of the table sat Greg Dawson, the HOA president. He was a tall man in his 50s, wearing a blazer that seemed too formal for the setting and a smug grin that never left his face. When Marcus introduced himself as a new homeowner hoping to discuss a misunderstanding, Greg's smile widened like a shark spotting prey. "So you're the one who's been walking on restricted property," Greg said, his tone carrying both accusation and satisfaction. "We have clear boundaries here, Mr. Hale. That area behind your house is HOA maintained. You can't just claim it's yours." Marcus remained calm. "Actually, I've reviewed my deed and the property map. That section is part of my parcel, lot number 43. You're mistaken." Greg leaned back, glancing at the other board members as if to show off. "That's not what our records say. If you keep crossing the line, we'll have no choice but to involve law enforcement. Rules apply to everyone here." The room fell silent. A few neighbors looked uncomfortable, while others smirked as if this kind of drama was routine. Marcus met Greg's gaze evenly. "I respect rules, Mr. Dawson. I just expect them to be applied correctly. Perhaps you should verify your records before making threats." Greg's smirk faltered for a second before he dismissed the comment with a laugh. "We'll see what the sheriff thinks." Marcus said nothing more. He simply nodded, thanked the board for their time, and left. As he walked out, whispers followed him, some sympathetic, others fearful. Outside under the cool evening air, Marcus smiled to himself. He had seen power-hungry men like Greg before, men who thrived on control until they faced someone who understood the law better than they ever could. This wasn't about grass or fences anymore. It was about arrogance, and Greg had just picked the wrong person to challenge. 3 days after the meeting, Marcus was enjoying a quiet Saturday morning, sipping coffee on his porch while reading the newspaper. The neighborhood was calm, the kind of stillness he had wanted when he bought the house. That peace was broken when 2 sheriff's deputies pulled up to his driveway. Their patrol car rolled to a stop, lights off, but the sight was enough to make a few neighbors peek through their blinds. Marcus set his cup down, already guessing who had sent them. One of the deputies, a young man with a polite but firm expression, approached. "Sir, are you Marcus Hale?" he asked. Marcus nodded. "We received a complaint from the Homeowners Association. They're accusing you of trespassing on HOA property. Would you mind talking to us for a moment?" Marcus stayed composed, his tone steady. "Of course, officers. Would you like to come inside? I think this will be a short conversation." Inside, he led them to his study, where the letter from the HOA still sat neatly on his desk. Next to it was a folder containing his property deed, survey maps, and title records. He handed the documents over calmly, explaining how the alleged common property was clearly within his boundary lines. The deputies looked over the paperwork, their expressions softening as they realized the accusation didn't hold up. As they flipped through the documents, one of them suddenly froze, his eyes landing on a framed photo on the bookshelf, a picture of Marcus standing in a courtroom, wearing his judicial robe, shaking hands with the county sheriff. Recognition flashed across his face. "Wait a second," the older deputy said, glancing up. "Judge Hale." Marcus gave a small, knowing smile. "That's right." Both officers immediately straightened, their tone shifting to respect. "Sir, we're sorry for the intrusion," the younger deputy said. "It looks like this was a misunderstanding on the HOA's part." "No harm done," Marcus replied. "But I would appreciate it if you could file an official report. Just to keep the record straight." They nodded and left shortly after, offering an apologetic handshake. Marcus watched them drive away, the corners of his mouth curling slightly. Greg Dawson had crossed a line he didn't even understand. The next move, Marcus knew, wouldn't happen in a neighborhood meeting. It would happen in a courtroom, on his terms. The day of the hearing arrived with an unusual stillness. The HOA board members filed into the courtroom, dressed stiffly, whispering among themselves. At their center was Greg Dawson, the president who had started it all. His usual confidence seemed to waver as he glanced around the large courtroom, realizing where he was, Judge Marcus Hale's domain. When the clerk announced the case and the judge entered, Greg's smirk disappeared completely. Marcus stepped onto the bench, wearing his robe, calm and composed. The silence that followed was almost electric. "Good morning," Marcus said evenly, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone used to absolute control. "Let's begin." The HOA's attorney attempted to present their side, insisting that the property in question fell under community maintenance. Marcus listened without interruption, taking careful notes. When the attorney finished, he turned to Greg and asked, "Did your board verify the property boundaries before accusing the homeowner of trespassing?" Greg hesitated, fumbling with his papers. "We believed," he began, but Marcus raised a hand. "Belief," he said, "is not evidence." Then Marcus presented his own documents, the property deed, the county survey, and a notarized statement from the title company. Each piece proved that the land was his private property. The courtroom was silent except for the shuffling of papers and Greg's nervous breathing. Marcus's expression never changed, though his eyes held the faintest glimmer of disappointment, not anger, but the kind reserved for people who abused authority. When the ruling came, it was firm and absolute. "The HOA has overstepped its authority," Marcus said clearly. "The false report to law enforcement, the harassment through official letters, and the misuse of community funds to pursue personal grievances, all are violations under state law." He ordered the HOA to pay damages and legal fees, required a full audit of their records, and mandated new elections for the board. Greg's face turned pale. The gavel came down with a single, echoing strike, sealing the decision. As the courtroom emptied, Marcus sat back for a moment, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He hadn't needed to raise his voice or show his power, the law had done that for him. Later that evening, he returned home, the neighborhood bathed in golden sunset. His front yard was peaceful again, his roses blooming untouched. Finally, the justice he had dedicated his life to had found its way right to his doorstep.